Welcome to the Curve-Unplugged. I am your moderator, Coach Keish, and today's topic is generational curses. Ouch. So, joining me on the couch tonight is Miss Perla Celeste,
Hello, everyone.
the lovely Cola T. Harris, because we must say the T, right?
That's right.
And Keena Monique. Hi. Our was it Plus Barbie? Plush Barbie.
We got two Barbies.
Yeah.
She's plus size Barbie and I'm plush Barbie.
Plus size Barbie, plush Barbie.
See, that what happened was plush plus size.
Okay. I gotta see what it looks like. Okay. So today's topic is generational curses. And I think that probably for all of us, we can identify whether it's in our personal life or things that we've seen in and around the people that we care about, how generational curses actually exist,
Yeah.
and then what can we do to change it? What would you say, Keena, that you've noticed that you can accept as a generational curse?
For me, the generational curse that stands out the most for me is not having the man in the household. Like, we are a lot of women in my family that are single mothers and doing everything by ourselves. So for myself, I would love to break that and hopefully find a husband that will be with me to the day that I die.
Okay. I think that's a big one.
Yeah.
Because I too come from a family with a lot of women, a lot of divorced women, a lot of single women. And in my life, it's more of the attitude of not knowing how to be in a relationship. You know, and I think that's something that's not even taught in my family. So that what we have seen is men come and go. You know, the family unit changes. Mama is the constant, but everybody else is kind of like, maybe they will, maybe they won't. So in my household, in my life, it's pretty much been the same thing, but more of the attitude of expecting that failure in that relationship to happen. What about you?
Oh man, I don't even know how to define it. Like it's not a specific definition. It's kind of like a windmill, kind of like of things. It's like this leads to this, leads to that, and it's all part of one set. So for me, for what I've noticed, it is, and it's on both sides of my family, not just like, oh no, my mom, oh yeah, my dad. It's on both sides. So it would be, oh gosh, I just have to go down the, right? So it would be children out of wedlock, not having a relationship with the father, single parenting. So it's like a whole, you know, like it's not just,
You gotta check the box. Basically.
yeah,
Okay.
you have to go through it. So I see it. I mean, I don't know if anyone else sees it, you know, but I see it because I took a step back, you know, like, wait a minute, something's not adding up. That's what mine would be.
Okay. Perla?
Okay, so I'm sure if we get into the segment, we'll think of other things, but the one that kind of comes to mind right now is it's sort of like the falling out in relationships, family relationships, like siblings not speaking to each other, cousins, you know, the brothers and sisters. We're talking about my grandparents, my mother with her siblings, and I kind of believe that's in both sides as well. But yeah, I think that happens a lot, and that's something that I strive. I think since I'm very young, I have a lot of I have 8 brothers and sisters, and 2 I was raised with. So I have 3 other brothers, 3 other sisters that I wasn't raised with, and I'm always, not as much now, but through my youth, I made sure that we, you know, if I had a chance to either go see them in New York or in Dominican Republic, I would, or I constantly call them and keep in touch with them. You know, so I think I sowed my seed with that amongst my siblings, because I know growing up, I saw it like in my family, like my my grandparents stopped talking to their siblings or cousins, which those cousins are like our uncles too, you know, or So, yeah, so that's something that I for sure want to make sure that ends, you know.
And it's very hard because a lot of times, I know in my family, the attitude of always kind of looking out for self, you know, even if it's at the detriment of someone else. So in your relationship, I don't know how many of you have heard, like, don't let your right hand know what your left hand doing.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
always have a pair and a spare. Or, you know, keeping something to yourself that was kind of like a secret from your spouse.
Mhm.
Some secret bank account or some
Yeah.
secret stash of money somewhere that he or she doesn't know anything about. Because in due time, this person is going to make you need that.
Yeah.
You know, need to have that little secret
Yeah.
away from them, because they're going to ultimately do something to hurt or damage the relationship to the point of no repair.
Mhm.
And a couple of those things was like an argument could happen between a married couple, and the next thing you know, they were getting divorced. Like, you couldn't even argue. Like, you couldn't disagree without it meaning it was the end of the world.
Yeah.
Then or now?
Even now, like
No.
when I look at my family as a whole, there are very few marriages that have stood the test of time. Very few. And even though my grandparents remained married to both of them passed away, they lived in separate rooms in the same house because the marriage was broken. They went to their separate corners, but they remained married, but they lived like two single people
Oh, wow.
because he didn't need to ask her nothing, she didn't need to ask him nothing. They just did their own separate thing. And it was taught to us basically in watching these examples around us that this is what the expectation is in a relationship, that it was ultimately going to be broken. And you had to already have set yourself up in such a way that you had that little game plan, that little bit of money hidden away, that little secret account, somebody else in your life who you could go to for
Wow.
whatever comfort you needed,
Yeah.
Right.
because this person isn't dependable. You know, even though you're married to them, oh, give it time, it's gonna fall apart. So you don't go into relationships expecting the happily ever after. You go into it expecting the worst.
That's crazy.
And I wonder, like, when you, now that we all have kids, everybody in this circle today has kids. Like, when you're teaching your kids about relationships, even friendships, do you feel you teach it in such a way that it's about maintaining those friendships? Or are we more so giving cautionary tales? Be careful because the girl I was friends with did this. Be careful how much you tell this friend because what if she does that? Or are we teaching our kids to cultivate relationships that will last a lifetime?
I have a 2-year-old, so I can't
Yeah, that's
get
kind
out.
of, yeah. It sounds like you're further on in the age that I am with my child. But recently, she had a little friend that told her in front of other people, I don't want to be your friend anymore. And like, they let her sit next to him, and they were like besties.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, okay, Amber, well, just say peace. Just peace. And so she tells me the next day or whatever day she was like, Mommy, I went up to him and said peace. I was like, well, I didn't tell you to say that if he didn't say anything to you. But I guess he's now noticed that she's no longer sort of interested or cared. And he came up to her last week and told her, oh, Amber, you don't want to be my friend anymore? And, so I really just say, hey, it was kind of like a lesson to me. It was like, let them go. Let them go, because you didn't do anything to them. Then they're gonna come and apologize to you. And I told her the other day, just make sure that you tell him, do not allow him to speak to you like that in front of people, and sort of, be mean like that in front of people, because that's not, there's words that you can't come back from. That's exactly what I said to her. So I mean, I have been very lucky to cultivate friendships after high school and still have them.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then I know we're very few. I have one of my girlfriend's fathers who's alive, so he's like 80. I mean, he's like a wealth of knowledge and wisdom that he's given us through the years. But when we were younger, like 18, 17, 20, 21, even, before 25, we'd be like, oh, you guys are not gonna last. And he sees us now, over 20 years later, and he's amazed, because it didn't happen for him. So, I mean, I would love for my daughter to have that. My best friend has been my best friend since I was 11. My girl best friend, so I have a guy best friend. But, yeah, so, I mean, I don't know if that went another way, but yeah, that's what I tell my daughter. That was my new little instances where I had to give that motherly advice. So
What about you and your daughter, Kina?
My strongest thing that I try to drill into my daughter is self-love. I want her to know that she can be herself no matter how different that is from other kids. Because her knowing her worth and loving herself will automatically help her pick who needs to be in her life and who doesn't need to be in her life. So that's all I care about is her knowing that she needs to stand up for herself and she needs to make sure she has the best people around her.
Now, one thing I know was difficult for me growing up because I didn't see a lot of it was, well, two things really. One was apologizing because there wasn't a lot of that in my family. There wasn't a lot of I'm sorry. Like my grandmother could be dead wrong and then figure out she was wrong and then she'll come back and say, I bought you this. Here you go, baby, enjoy it. Like she couldn't say, I'm sorry for accusing you of taking my brooch. I found it in another purse. Like she couldn't do that. So apologizing was one of the very biggest challenges for me because I didn't come from a family that did a lot of apologizing. And the second thing that I struggled with, and I still struggle with, is affection. Because we weren't a hugging family. Like we didn't greet
that's
each
a good
other
one.
in
I
that
gotta
way.
say that one's for me too.
We didn't greet each
Actually.
other in that way. So since we didn't do a lot of hugging, and like if you were crying, it was like, go get yourself together and come back. You know, there wasn't a lot of consoling.
Hardcore.
You know, so that for me is a struggle even to this day. When people are dealing with emotional things, or when something is emotional for me. One time my best friend was in the hospital, right? And she was really sick, and I knew it, but because I couldn't take seeing her in the hospital, I just didn't go. Now, if in her shoes, what did that look like to her? It looked like I didn't care. Now, here's the reality. Someone else who meant less to me could have went to the hospital, right? And I would have went and visited them just fine because it wasn't that emotional to me. But the fact that it was her made it harder for me to go, to show up. And that translated into I didn't care.
Of course.
But I didn't come from a family that put that on the front burner. Like, we didn't show a lot of what we would consider weakness. So crying and needing to apologize and all that shit looked like you weak because you're begging for someone's attention in their time. If you're doing that, you said what you said, that's what you meant, then that's what it is. Now we're gonna either walk by each other for 2 weeks and then one day you're gonna say, pass me the salt, and I'm gonna pass it and we're gonna start talking back and that's gonna be it. But nobody ever says I'm sorry. So those are two challenges that now I don't have a problem with I'm sorry. Like I'm good with that. If I'm wrong, okay, I'm wrong. My bad, I'm sorry. But I struggle with affection because affection comes from a place that is so unfamiliar to me that at that moment when I am needed to show up in an emotional, affectionate way, I tend to fail. I tend to take a hard left and then they're like, what the hell just happened? Because I'm just not good with that.
Now wait a second. Are you talking about an intimate relationship?
Period. For
Just
people
period.
I care about. A young lady at my job recently, her brother passed away. And she
Okay,
got
we
the phone
talked
call
about
at
that,
work. She was crying, and I'm standing next to her, and I'm like, well, let me get you some water, because I don't know what else I'm supposed to do. And then someone else walked in and understood what happened and just went to embrace her and was like, it's okay.
Yeah, I can't do that.
I am not that person. I don't know what to do. Now, if you're bleeding, I got you. But if you are emotionally hurt and broken, I'm not the best person to know what do you do in those situations?
You're supposed to hug. We just didn't get hugged.
Didn't
So
get
we
hugged,
can't do it.
exactly. We
So
didn't
we
get
can't
the
do
hug.
it. Exactly.
And as a mom, that was my greatest fear, that I wouldn't know to hug my boys.
See, but so then we'll segue into me. That's one of the generational curses that I think I've sort of I've been able to sort of control in a sense that I do tell my daughter I love her and I hug her, because I didn't grow up having any of that. My mom never hugged me, and my mom never said I love you. That was like a fact. But when I turned 25, that she almost had like a near-death experience. She made that sort of change within her and said, you know, I'm gonna make sure that when you guys come in the door, we're gonna say I love you and you can go hug. And I was like, okay, lady. It felt weird her doing it even. Okay, but she made that change. So it's something that, you know, took that long, 25, but it's never too late to do it, you know. So I say I love you when I hang up on her, and then I hear it and it sounds weird, but yeah.
All right. So we have so much more to cover,
So much.
but we will be back in 2 and 2. Now, at the bottom of your screen, don't forget to hit subscribe. All right. All right. So we'll see you in a bit. We'll be back. It's the Curve-Unplugged. Welcome back to the Curve-Unplugged. I'm Coach Keisha, your moderator, and today we are talking about generational curses. So right before we went to break, Perla, you were sharing with us that your mom had a health scare.
She had a health scare once, and she then chose to change the narrative in our family and to start sort of greeting you with an I love you, a hug,
Mm-hmm.
and saying I love you. And so, so she's been doing it for the past, I guess, it's been almost a little bit less than 20 years, but now it feels different.
Mm-hmm.
It's better. It's good to do that because my daughter sees it, and they're seeing something different than we saw growing up.
Yes. Like even growing up with family members or parents that have substance abuse problems. I grew up with a parent that had a drinking problem. And it wasn't just his drinking problem, but it was his brother had the same drinking problem, his mother had a drinking problem, his dad had a drinking problem. So it was like, I guess that's 2 generations. And I just refused, like I don't drink at all, and I don't knock anybody for drinking, but drinking is not my thing because I saw how abusive drinking made them.
Mm.
But you see some families where alcoholism or drug abuse or even going to jail all the time. I used to be a CO, and you would see the granddaddy, the daddy, and then the son, and they're all locked up
No
together.
way.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Because that's another generational curse.
Absolutely.
That you have families that can't stay out of trouble. Just can't. Just always.
But I think they also, for us that maybe haven't gone to jail, prison, or whatever, that's like the ultimate big deal. But when you see that someone has survived it, your grandfather survived it, your father survived it, so you are at the notion where you think it's not a big deal. So that's the curse itself, where it's like you don't see it as a big deal. The drinking, I saw it growing up, it's not a big deal. So I mean that's where it comes from to me.
And that's the same thing with all of it. Is when not knowing how to apologize doesn't seem like a big deal if nobody apologized in your family. So I think in my family there were less hurt feelings about not getting an apology.
Yeah.
Because nobody apologized.
Right.
But then when you're dealing with people outside of your core family, and you do something to them and then you don't apologize, they don't bounce back like that.
Right.
Because they may not come from that same place.
Yeah.
We talk about brokenness in others, but we forget that we all grew up with some amount of something's broken, even
Absolutely.
the way we were raised.
Yeah.
Because the thing that seems normal is the thing that on the outside looking in was abnormal. For me, growing up in a house with just my mom raising us, I would go to my cousin's house and see my uncle and aunt living under the same roof, and that would be phenomenal to me. Or I would go over to Nikki's house, she was my best friend, and she is my best friend. Let me get that straight because I don't want nobody else saying she's my best friend. So let's be clear, you can only get one. I am it. But Nikki's house, and she had 2 parents in her house. So for me, I was always fascinated with how do they do this? Like how do you have a mom and a dad in the same house? Because that's not what I came from. And even like I said with my grandparents, they shared a house, but in 2 different east wing, west wing of the house. There was no coming together.
But don't you think that happens after a certain age though, like when they're older? I didn't even think that
Well,
was
that was pretty much the common thread with them for several years before they even became.
But I feel like every
elderly.
time I think about the elderly, they end up in separate rooms anyway. Like I have yet to see old people in bed together and wanting their own little twin beds separately. I don't know.
And maybe that's again from their generation. I remember watching I Love Lucy. Their bedroom scenes were always 2 twin beds.
Yeah, they were.
And they were a young married couple at that time.
Mm-hmm.
But
I
they
Love
even
Lucy
had
too, I
twin
remember
beds
that.
in I Love Lucy. They didn't share a bed. But that, I think that was more the sign of the times.
Yeah.
So for the people who are
Same.
like in their 80s net right now, like those older people, they come from that. So
Right.
that's not necessarily mean they're separate, but it just means
That's what I'm saying,
that the way the sign of the times then was there were two separate beds.
Right.
But they didn't know just live in separate rooms, they lived separate lives.
Oh.
Right.
But so when I see little old couples like holding hands
Mm-hmm.
in a grocery store, a little old man opening the door for his wife, it's not a normal thing for me to see.
So you
Because I
like,
didn't
"Oh."
see that. So I'm always like, oh my gosh,
Right.
look at that, he's holding the door for her still. That's normal for them. But it's abnormal for me.
Yeah, I get that.
So it's an expectation. That's what it is.
And
Should we
so
expect
you're
more?
married,
I
and you
am.
said you come from a family of not so much that.
Right.
So you're changing the narrative by showing your family and your kids, mommy and daddy can exist in the same house.
I'm working on it. No, I am because I've never really seen that unit. I mean, my mom and dad lived together my whole life. Like they've always lived together, but they weren't a unit. You know, like daddy paid the bills and gave us money to go places, and mommy washed the clothes and cooked the food and gave us hugs and kisses and watched animated movies with us for hours. Like literally hours. Like, so that's what it was, but I never saw them together. I never saw my dad and my mom kiss. Like, I seen them kiss one time, and that's when they got married. But that was probably like my first time seeing them actually like embrace each other. Like, and I was 22. I was 22. That was my first time seeing my mom and dad kiss.
Wow.
So what I'm doing now, what I've always wanted, like, as far as being born out of wedlock, my son was born out of wedlock. Like, we were not married when I got pregnant or nothing. And for me, it was like, okay, so I'm pregnant. And for him, it was like, you pregnant? Oh, crap, what am I telling my daddy? What am I telling my mama? Right? Because he grew up in a two parents, and even for me seeing his parents hug and kiss, oh my gosh, like mom, dad, I didn't watching this. Like, I was like, you know, like I never saw that, and just to see the passion behind them. So that's one of the things, the main things that we show Carter, like and Riley, like I be like, let him see you kiss me. He needs to know that. He needs to know that daddy loves mommy. Like, he needs to see us hug. Like, if we're kissing and you see him come in, don't stop kissing me. Hug me even more. So now Carter wants to hug. You know, and he wants to embrace you. He hugs everybody. You know, like he saw you in the store, and as excited as you got to see him, he got that excited to see you.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that I'm trying to show my kids, you know, just that love exists, and it exists here at home. So you don't have to go look for it somewhere else. Because with me and my sisters, you know, I would say that one of the things we did was kind of search for somebody to say I love you. Because my dad doesn't say that. Like, he says it now all the time. Like you said, like, it's so awkward sometimes when he be on the phone, he be like, all right, yeah, baby, I love you. I love you too, Dad. Okay, you know, I get kind of like, okay, because it's unexpected. Even now, like, my dad likes to hug you. As soon as he sees you, he want to hug you. When I was younger, I tell you no lies, I wish I had this picture with me right now. There's a picture of me climbing on my daddy's back, and I was trying to give him a hug, and every time I see that picture, I have a flashback of that moment. And he was telling me, girl, get off me now, you know I don't like all that stuff. And you can see it in his face, he looked like this. That's how he look in the picture, and I have a flashback of that moment, because I think that was the moment where I stopped trying to hug everybody. Like, if you didn't hug me first, I'm not trying to hug you, because I don't know if you like that or not.
Aww.
Yeah, like, I ain't trying to run up on you and hug you, and no cousins, nothing. I don't hug nobody unless they reach out to hug me first. So that's definitely the thing we're showing our kids, like, embrace, love, hug. We be like, Carter hug Riley, Riley hug Carter. Like, we always tell them to hug each other. Well, me at least does. You know, that's a thing for me.
And if you're not careful, the thing that's broken about you, you teach it to other people. Like, you teach other people around you to be standoffish.
Yes.
So my dad passed away in 2013. His anniversary was yesterday, actually. And when he died, my biggest thing was, I don't want nobody touching me. Like, don't hug me, because right now I don't need that.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just my way of kind of like compartmentalizing what was happening at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
We had to make funeral arrangements. My sister had to get here from Atlanta. My brother was in California. Like, a lot of stuff was happening. And we needed to focus and get things done. Now, if you want to stop and hug me, it's almost like now I got to accept the end of the world just came, because that's how it felt to me.
Yeah.
You know. So even I told Nikki, and she's an affectionate person, much more so than I am. But I could see in her face she was kind of torn. Do I hug her? Do I step over here? So what I'm gonna do? You hungry? We can go get some food. And then I sat on one end of the couch and she sat on the other end. And then it was like, okay, I'm going to sleep, and that was it. Because it wasn't on her that it was like that. It was on me that it's like that.
Yeah.
Because that's how I'm built. And I don't want to keep passing it. Now I have a granddaughter, Skylar, who is so loving. She runs up to you, she wants to hug and kiss. And I don't want her to feel like there's something wrong with it. Like you just said, if somebody stops you enough times, then it turns you off from doing it for everybody.
Of course.
Yeah.
So these are things that I have to always be reminding myself, you know, this is the moment to hug. This is the time to give some affection or some words of affirmation to my son for doing well in school, or some encouragement to one of my sisters because they need it. I may hate everything else you did, but you did this one thing that was amazing, and I need to say something about that because I'm the oldest sister. So I'm usually the one that's like, why did you do that?
Yeah.
So I'm chastising 90% of the time.
Yeah.
And that other 10% has to be reserved for love. It
Yes,
has to be
I
reserved for
can definitely feel you on that, because, okay, so here we go. My mom has 6 kids. My dad has 3. The 3 that my dad has starts with me. My youngest sibling from my mom is 7 years older than me. Our oldest sister is 13 years older than me. So the oldest 3 never lived with us. So in our house it was me and my 2 little sisters. So I am an oldest, although I have 3 older siblings. And with my little sisters, I am always like on 1,000. Like, why did you do that? Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? And then I forget midway that I'm your sister. Like, you don't expect that from me because I'm your sister. So midway, I'm like, all right.
How much older are you compared to your sister?
My sisters, so it's me, I'm the oldest, and then there's 5 years between me and the second, and then, oh goodness gracious, 7. There has to be about 7 years between me and the youngest, because I think there's 2 years between my middle sister and my little sister.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So with the one that's 5 years, I think that my parents expected us to be like besties. Like, they're gonna tag team this thing. And it did not work out that way, like, at all.
5 years is too much.
Exactly. And
that's for a year or 2.
Right. So I did expect my middle sister and my baby sister to be besties. That did not happen. But that's because my oldest sister had my oldest niece 2 years after my little sister. So they're 2 years apart. My niece is 20 and my little sister will be 22. So they're besties. So yeah, it was no hope for no besties in this sisterhood that we had here.
I understand the best friend struggle.
Right. So what ended up happening is me and my baby sister, we battled for who's the oldest, you know. So we're both always trying to handle everything. Like, this is how it's supposed to be. Do it like this. No, do it like this. You do this. You say this. But so right now, the thing you were mentioning when we was on break about like us breaking up, like how you don't stay together like during families, like your family just like falls apart. That happens between me and my 3 sisters all the time. Like all the time. It's like, well, I'm talking to her, so it is what it is.
Right, and you lose years, like literally you could add up years.
Okay.
So like, oh, we didn't speak in probably 2007 for 6 months, and you didn't speak in whatever for another freaking year, and it's like ridiculous.
It
It's ridiculous, and I feel like every time you come back, you lose a little bit of a connection. Every time you come back, it's hard. Every time that you come back, it's like, you know, and especially if there's no apology or no sorry or no hashing it out to realize how you got there.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? But even though in my family it's happened, we've been very good about hashing things out. So I think it's, you know, we're still good. There's never been like an issue that we haven't come back from. So there is times where it happens, we have gotten in a way better from it.
Mm.
So, you know, because the talk has happened.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, good point. Well, Keena gonna talk when we come back. So
It's so deep. It's so deep.
we are going to take a break, but we will be back in 2 and 2. Stay tuned to the Curve Unplugged. Welcome back to the Curve Unplugged. I'm Coach Keisha, moderator, and today's topic is generational curses. Now, I know you have a T-shirt you want to share with us.
I do.
Okay, tell us about it.
So I have this shirt here. It says "Stronger Than the Struggle." It's done by.
You gotta turn
Oh,
around.
I gotta
so the
turn
people,
around. I'm
the
so
people
sorry,
can't see
guys.
it.
So I have this wonderful shirt. It says "Stronger Than the Struggle." It's a design by my sister-in-law. Her name is Meek Morgan. You can get this shirt and many other inspirational shirts on her website, meekmorgan.com. And you can follow Godly Wives on Instagram and Facebook. She also has like that little marketplace thing that's attached to the Facebook account. So this shirt, wow. I just went through a recent time in my life where I really was like broken down by all the generational curses that are attached to my family. Like I am trying very hard to like begin breaking them for our children. You know, like me and my sisters, I have my brothers, their children, you know, because even though me and my older siblings, we all have different fathers, me and my little sisters, we have the same father. So, but in our whole line, you know, there are many generational curses that are affecting us. And this shirt came along in a time where I just wasn't so sure that I could be a part of breaking any of the curses. Like, I can't, like, I'm not strong enough. Like, I can't do it. Like, I wasn't made for this. And I saw these words and I was like, wait a minute. It was like a revelation, like you're stronger than the struggles. Like, you are stronger. And I sent them to my sister and she was like, oh yes. Like, oh yes, this needs to be out there. Like, people need to know that they are stronger than their circumstances. You're stronger than, you know, what your grandparents did. You're stronger than, you know, what your parents did. You are stronger. Like, you don't have to fall in the same line of what they did. You can be that change in your life, in your family. And I'm trying so hard. Like, you know, like, it's hard because you look at what the people older than you have done and you're like, on one hand, you're like, that was terrible, why would you do that? Then it's like, on another hand, you can kind of see why you did that. I can see why you did that. And then it's like, okay, but however, you know, let's look at what you did and what it cost. So, like, as far as giving love, pretty much, showing love, you said something earlier about having a fairy tale marriage, right? My mother-in-law has recently told me, Cola, you need to get that fairy tale out your head. She said it just like that. And I was like, girl, I don't want my fairy tale. Like, I want to be Cinderella and Belle. Like, come on. Like, why was all these princesses made if I can't be like them? Right? And she was like, because they're not showing you the work that goes into the ending. Like, you don't just get it.
Between.
Right. Like, you don't get that happily ever after by just showing up and being pretty. You know, there's work that goes into it. Like, we like how we talk about being from different
different families, like your family, my husband's family, he come from a family with a mom and dad and, you know, house and pies, and his mom can bake and she be whipping it up. You girl, talking about, you know? And I come from a 2-parent household, however, that same cake and pie and lovey-dovey stuff wasn't there.
Mhm.
So we have different views.
Experiences.
Yeah.
Perspective.
Right, we have different perspectives of how things go. Like, I do have the perspective of if you get on my nerves and you don't need to be in the same room as me, like, bye. And he has the perspective of if I'm getting on your nerves, then we need to talk about it. Why am I getting on your nerves? How am I getting on your nerves?
You're getting on my nerves right now by saying
Right, you know. But the main thing that this slogan or these words have told me each time that I get in that mood is that you're stronger than this. Like, you're stronger. Don't let this bring you down. And then from there, you know, I open up. Like the thing you're saying about apologizing. Gee, if you ask him, I don't know what that is. Like, what's an apology? For what? Because I wasn't wrong, right? And I have said that to him. I can't apologize because I don't feel like I was wrong. So, what you want? Right,
So the
I'm
first thing
working
is
on it.
acceptance and realizing that you are before you can even do it.
Right, no, but I don't be wrong. So,
Right.
that's the thing. In my head, like, I can't, okay, somewhere I gotta figure out to realize when I was actually wrong. I don't know if maybe if one day that I am wrong.
We're gonna let her think about it, guys. But
Why?
Keena, you had something that you wanted to say, right?
Because I'm an artist and entertainer, the biggest thing that I had to face was my self-esteem. And the women in my family have definitely not been an example of a woman with a strong self-esteem. Like, I'm talking about femininity and sexuality and just being okay with being who you are and just accepting whatever comes to you. I had to rewire my mind to be like, no, I deserve the best. It's okay for me to be feminine. It's okay for me to open up and be comfortable in my own skin. And I really feel like it has something to do with the fact that I'm in a generation where we have the freedom to say, well, I don't want to date him. This is the type of guy I want. But my parents, my dad's side comes from Georgia. My mom's side is Mississippi. So these are the generations where my grandparents were a part of segregation. And back then, you didn't have, oh, well, I don't want to date so-and-so. You pretty much didn't have all of that luxury of what we have today. So those women, they worked, you know, as servants. So the self-esteem obviously is not there because you have to work for people who think that they're better than you because of segregation. And I see that through my grandmother. My grandmother was watching TV with me one day, and she was looking at I think it's Wheel of Fortune, and she was looking at the white woman. She was like, oh, I don't understand why they get so skinny. I wish I was that skinny. And I'm like, well, what's wrong with being plus size? Like, that's not the standard of beauty for me.
Right.
But because of where they come from as a generation, that self-esteem is there. So that was one of the things that I had to deal with, and I'm still dealing with it. Like, just being okay with me and knowing that at this size that I'm at, I still deserve to be loved.
Yeah. Definitely.
You know, I look at our parents and our grandparents, especially coming from the time and place that most of them come from. My grandmother and grandfather, they come from sharecropping families. So, you know, my grandmother came here and worked at a hotel in Coral Gables, a well-renowned hotel that at the time, she could only come through the back door. And a few years ago, we were at that same hotel as guests, and we had a platform and we had to get up and speak. And all I was thinking the whole time I was there was like, this is I'm standing in the place that my grandmother was only good enough to clean. She couldn't stay here, you know. So I believe that they give us the best that they have, even in the brokenness, because that's all they know.
Right.
So thereby, they passed along the lesson as they understood it. And then it's our job to now understand it a little better and pass on a better lesson forward to our kids,
Right.
to the next generation.
I have a little story.
Okay.
Because you just reminded me of it. Because, you know, I talk about my mother, but I know that she came from zero. zero hugs and zero I love you.
Mhm.
Both her parents. So poor thing, she's doing a million times better than even by just whatever maybe showing some sort of affection that I'm sure she did. Just not verbal because her parents were worse. Oh my goodness. When I would go see my grandmother, I would go to like hug her. Now she was this tiny little thing, like under 100 pounds. So and she was Jehovah's Witness. I would go to church and she'd be like, "Oh, this is my granddaughter." People would be like, "That's your granddaughter." But anyway, when I would come up to this woman, she'd be like, no arms out, no arms out, not even like turning the cheek. She'd be like this. I'm like, okay, grandma, she couldn't do it. She couldn't do it. That's why you just reminded me of that right now. Oh my God, poor baby. So man, that's my mom's mom. She wasn't raised with her, but that it's like it's in there. You know what I'm saying? She wasn't raised with her, but it's in there. My grandfather wasn't any better. You know what I'm saying? My grandfather wasn't any better. So
Because when we think about what even the picture of when people say a strong woman, she always seems to be a warrior of some kind. Like she had to overcome something. We don't consider strong women those women who are so confident in their sexuality and in their femininity, and those women who give out hugs and love and bake pies, and we don't think that those women are strong because we're not taught to believe that.
right.
You know, the fairy tale concept, although I absolutely cannot stand any of those Cinderella
Because
stories.
you're a boy child.
No, not because of that, but because of the lesson I think it teaches. And that lesson is that women are always your enemy. Because in every one of those stories, it's an evil stepmother, evil witch, evil stepsisters. All of those stories share that common vibe. And the only thing that saves you is the man on the horse.
Yeah.
You know, there was no sisterhood in a positive way.
Okay.
If women were coming together, it was always against you. It was never for you. The first time Disney put out something that kind of challenged that thought process was the movie Frozen. Because in Frozen, at the end, the sister saves her sister, right? And then in the movie Brave, then you have this girl who decides, I don't want to follow what every other woman in my family, every other woman has done and is doing. But the stories we grew up on were Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, who else? The rest of them heifers, it was the same concept.
No, the one with the mirror on the wall, who's that?
Sleeping Beauty.
It was Snow White.
It was Snow White.
So all of
Snow
those
White was
stories
like the
shared
evil
that
witch.
common thread, and that common thread was always evil women.
Rapunzel too, her mom was named too.
Exactly. All of those stories shared a common thread. It was never about sisterhood. So thereby, we would read those stories, and it subliminally, it gave us the same message. That women are not for you, they're against you. So when you're trying to step outside of that, so when your cousin does something, your sister does something, you see that Cinderella story, your happy ever after is caught up in her shit right now. Like you messing with my happily ever after right now. You're messing with it.
wedding.
And your happily ever after doesn't necessarily mean that you have kids. Doesn't mean that a man on a horse rode in and swept you away. It doesn't mean any of that. But your happily ever after should be left to your own interpretation.
And I just wanted to be clear, because me digging deep into my generational curses is not from a place of judgment. I feel like my job is to have compassion for their struggle.
I agree.
Because some people will hold stuff against their parents, but it's like you don't understand that your parents never had the capacity, like you said, to give you something. So don't judge them, have compassion for it and fix it.
Yes.
Right.
And that's how we get past it.
Right, and that's why I said about my mother and what my mother got from her mother. You know what I'm saying? It's not even, they don't even mean to. You know?
What happens when your parent becomes like your other child? What happens when you have that situation where, okay, this is my mom, I get it, I know she's broken, I know she struggles with these things, but now her struggle has become my responsibility. Now it's my burden to bear. Because, someone I know, their mother has a drinking problem. So she's been put out of everywhere. So now the siblings wind up, she lives with one now, then 6 months later, she winds up living with the other one. And now the one that's left she hasn't moved in with is like, yeah, I don't know about that. Like, I don't know what we're gonna do. Because if she get put out from over there, I don't want her in my house, and I gotta do, because now she's like their child.
Yeah, but I think at that point, that's when you as a child have the brain capacity or the thought frame to, that you know that something is wrong, you should then try to, instead of babysitting it, try to help it. Try to change it, because there are times, it's
How do you fix your
situational.
parent?
It's situational because there are times where your parent doesn't even know that that's happening to them. I'm not saying like alcoholism.
No, I
they
get
know
Right,
that.
right,
but-
which is gonna be the hard part, is to even get them to believe that they have a problem. So it's very easier said than done when you say,
No,
"No,
I've
they
done
get
it. I've done it. I've done it.
Yeah.
That's what
And
I'm
my
saying.
mom is
It's-
not gonna allow you to tell her what to do.
No,
My
but
mom either.
My mom is not gonna allow
That's
you to
never
tell her
gonna
what to
happen.
do.
granted, but that's not the, you're not supposed to be telling them what to do. You're supposed to be, you make them aware of it so that they can become conscious of it, because
Right, and they're gonna leave and go to someone else's house, but they're not gonna go to your house and do whatever you want them to do. That's the way, that's the one that I have.
And the problem continues, because
mom was mean.
when you, no, it's not necessarily that, but it's the reality of, again, you can't fix something if it doesn't know it's broken. Like, you can't fix people.
Right,
And,
no, that's,
and even in trying to help them, you
And I
can
think
make
this
them
might be a
aware.
two-part, that,
Yeah,
because that's one, you know, we talked to Rick about Ayala and Fix My Life, and I think that this is gonna have to be a 2-segment thing, because
Okay.
really,
yeah.
there's a
'Cause
whole
you
other
can't-
stuff I wanna talk about that.
Like, you can't fix broken, but you can bring the brokenness to the forefront. Like, you are like this because of this. And like,
but what if you don't know that? Because
You
there's
don't-
so many secrets in our families.
Mhm.
A lot of times we don't know. And I'm agreeing with Perla now. I know this is a part two.
It is.
Because when we think about abuses that happen in families,
Yeah.
a lot of times those things are what the end result becomes the monster mommy that you wind up dealing with later, or the dad from hell that you have to deal with later. But it's because of those secrets that they had to keep, and things that happened that never got addressed when they were growing up as well. So, okay, thank you ladies.
I
Thank
didn't know
you
this
so
was gonna
much.
get so deep.
Yes.
I didn't know.
So, again, guys, remember at the bottom of the screen, please hit subscribe. We promise you some great conversations. And, feel free to send us put a comment at the bottom too. Let us know what you think. We want to hear from you. Thank you for tuning in. Again, this is Coach Keish and the Curve Unplugged.
Bye.
Peace out.